Thank you. Good evening. Wow, it's great to be here. When I became a rabbi in 2006, it was not no intention to be a congregational rabbi at all. I had this perverse habit, a little hobby of studying medieval rabbinic texts because I had seen all the Seinfeld reruns. There was nothing else to do in my spare time except lug these books around and read. And after doing that for quite a few years, someone said, you should really take your examinations for smicha. You should try to get Rabbinic Ordination. So I did it more or less just as some type of gatepost, just to acknowledge the work that I put in with absolutely no intention of being a congregational rabbi. And then, as fate would have it, I got a phone call in early 2009 from a friend saying, Greg, I have a shul for you. And I said, I'm not interested. I'm playing music. I don't want to be a congregational rabbi. And he said, it's in the East Village. You should check it out. I said, all right. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the East Village. I met my wife there. Anyway, I didn't think too much of it, but I went to the interview with the search committee. And a couple months later, I was the rabbi of the 6th Street Community Synagogue in the East Village. But I only did it full-time because I was already doing music full-time. So I kept that going together, and it was really hard. It was not not a high membership at the time, and I couldn't really make a living as a rabbi. Luckily, I had something safe to fall back on, playing the saxophone. But we did start the Center for Jewish Arts and Literacy, and every night of the week, we had an opportunity for people to explore Judaism in a comfortable, non-threatening, very open way, followed by either a concert with world-class musicians, or a poetry reading, or original avant-garde Jewish theater, all sorts of really cool things, the kind of place that I would want to hang out at. And it became pretty successful. And I did that until about 2012, and I realized I would never be able to afford to live in that neighborhood. But anyway, we had a great time, and we really proved that there is a connection between the arts and spirituality, and specifically Jewish spirituality, and that they made great partners. And by looking at Judaism through the lens of a creative artist, or looking at the arts through the tradition and insight of Judaism, you could probably have a more fulfilling life. I always knew that music was the most spiritual thing I could possibly do. I grew up going to a Reform synagogue, at least until my bar mitzvah. After that, I was out of there. And I never thought I would return. When I was in college, if someone had asked me if I was Jewish, I would have said, I'm not, but my parents are. Maybe some of you can relate to that. And through unbelievable mechanisms of the cosmos, I ended up actually doing what I call mercenary work, my mercenary phase in the early 80s. I was playing Hasidic weddings on Monday and Tuesday nights, deep in the bowels of Brooklyn. That's before Brooklyn was Brooklyn. Back then, Brooklyn was just Brooklyn. And Williamsburg was either all Spanish-speaking or all Yiddish-speaking. And there was nothing else happening there. And one night I was playing at this greasy catering hall in Williamsburg, not a Spanish-speaking venue. And it was one of those weddings where maybe 700 people, 800 people were there. Unbelievable collection of people. And I was playing in this band that would play music for the dancing. And the way it works in those circles is it's all one big song. It's one big medley. You start playing, oompa, oompa, esta, 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 da, 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 and you go until they tell you to stop. Usually about 45 minutes for a Hasidic. 45 minutes they would dance without stopping. All right. But we call this an endurance gig. It's good for your chops. You play for 45 minutes without stopping, and you feel like you had a pretty good workout. On this night, after 45 minutes, we're looking at the band leader, who was a very nice Bubba Chassid, and we're looking at him. Time for a break. And just keep playing. All right, we liked him. He was a nice guy. So after another 15 minutes, we'd been playing 1 hour nonstop, and we're looking at him again. No, don't play. And he says, no, keep playing. So musicians are looking at each other. After another 5 minutes, we started going like this. We're going to throttle him. We're going to choke him. He said, no, keep going, keep going, keep going. We went for an hour and a half. Finally, we stopped after an hour and a half. We stopped. The Hasidim didn't stop. They were still dancing and singing. But they were singing another song. They weren't even listening to us. I said, man, they were transported. That's what I wanted. Because that's what I want to do when I play music. I wanted to be transported into just another zone. And I realized that night the power of music. And I was intrigued. I wanted to be able to know music that way and just be a conduit. And, all the preparation and all the scales and arpeggios and learning tunes and jam sessions, playing all this really was just preparation to be sort of a blank slate and let everything come together. And around the same time, I was getting interested in studying classic texts and finding out something about being Jewish, because I realized being in these environs that I knew nothing about my Jewish heritage at all. Nothing. And I'm with people whose Judaism is an important part of their life, but also who are living the kind of spiritual life that I thought you needed to, go to Tibet or someplace in Siberia, and study all this other mystical literature. I realized that we had it right here in our tradition. So I started studying, and I realized the connection that there is a phenomenon almost unique to Judaism. The phenomenon is prophecy. It's prophecy. Being able to cultivate your inner listening to such an extent that you hear things that most people can't hear. And realize that's what music is, really. These days, the music schools are turning out very, very accomplished technicians who can play faster than any human being has ever played faster before, and they know this, but most of the time they don't really sound any different. But you can tell in a couple of notes of somebody who's really being a channel for some higher power through their music. And I started to find ways to find out how I could translate this whole concept of prophecy into my music. Now, those of you that have been fortunate enough to go to a synagogue over the past month or so and hear the story of the Exodus from Egypt, very famous story. And of course, even if the only thing you do Jewish all year is go to a Passover Seder, you hear about this story. And sometimes the leaving of Egypt gets the most attention. But if you really look and you read between the lines, you realize that there's introduction of prophecy to the Jewish people. And the moment that introduced prophecy to the Jewish people was a musical moment. It was at the splitting of the Red Sea. And after the Red Sea split and they were saved, what did they do? They sang. And the Talmud talks about the nature of this song, that it was a prophetic song, that every single person had a prophetic experience. And of course, from there, the potential was there. And we see we had great figures in our history. All of the people that you read about in the Bible, from Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah and Rachel and Leah, Jacob, they were all prophets. They heard voices. It was the voice of God. And later on, we see the books of the prophets. The Talmud tells us, though, that from most of the prophets had to have music in order to have a prophecy. There was a connection between music and prophecy. But what's the nature of this prophecy? So there's a clue to the nature of this prophecy in a section, one of my favorite sections. Luckily, being a rabbi, I can say that actually about any section and be speaking the truth because it's such a great book. But some of you might be familiar with this famous story, and it comes from the Parsha, B'Halotcha. And in this, Moses' brother and sister, Aaron and Miriam, are talking about Moses behind his back. God doesn't like that too much, gives him a little punishment, but in addition to that, gives him what we call in the yeshiva musar. Gives some very harsh language, pointing out that they have got a serious character flaw that they have to take care of. And God tells Aaron and Miriam they cannot compare themselves to Moses. And the way that God tells them that is very interesting. And I think to me, this is the key to understanding prophecy and the connection with music. Torah says, Peh el peh adaber bo. I speak to Moses face to face. Bimara, in some type of vision, below bechidot, and not in a riddle, not in a puzzle, not in an allegorical way, which implies if Moses is the only person in the history of the Jewish people that had that relation, that everybody else that had prophecy had it in the form of an allegory, had it in the form of something that they had to work to figure out. I said, wow. As a jazz musician, that's really what I try to do, is try to react and figure out what these combinations of notes represent, allegorically. Is it just a B flat and an F sharp? No, it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than that. Each combination of notes represents great ideas. Same thing about this book. One of the unique things about Judaism, especially the Torah, is that it's unlike any other fundamental text ever written before, because it's an auditory language. It's meant to be listened, and each word has so many levels that it can be interpreted. It's not like reading Aristotle or Plato or any classic religious text at all. It's the only system where you can get 3 or 4 words and go on and get layers and layers of meaning. It's not surprising you can go to a group of jazz musicians. We've never played together. We're going to just go up and start playing because we realize that no matter how many times we play a 12-bar blues, there's always more. There's more meaning I can get of playing Jerome Kern's All the Things You Are, or playing any of these things that become really vehicles for prophecy in a certain way. Anyway, I'm very, very grateful to be able to live my life being informed by this, because it really gives a great meaning into everything that I choose to do. And for those of you that haven't seriously checked out the multi-layered aspect of our principal text, I urge you to check it out. It's worth your time. It's definitely worth your time. The stories are nice. That's the beautiful thing about it. You get a good story at the very least, but it's a lot more than that. And I think that's it. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's so therapeutic for me to be able to verbalize, my relationship with the two passions in my life. And I bless all of you that you should be able to get as much satisfaction from music and spirituality as I do. And thank you very much.